Milam speaking to you. We acknowledge that colonialism has made invisible their histories and connections to the land. As a city, we are learning and building relationships with the people whose lands we are on. I think this is particularly important to acknowledge as we have some guest speakers talking about the crisis response and all three of the overlapping crises that we're experiencing as a city disproportionately impact Indigenous peoples in our community. And so I think it's very on topic to be thinking about that today. So before we do a round of intros, I'll just ask the board if there are any changes to the agenda before we move. Okay. Can someone move the adoption of the agenda? Okay, all approved. All opposed? Okay, so we have some guests. We will do a round first quickly, I think, because you might be, I just want to acknowledge, like, fire, police. I don't want any brawls today. I don't want any, leftover body checking from, rubbing in. Yep, Paul just let us know he was practicing on his skates last night. So I just let's keep it clean here today. But we'll start with you.
Oh, Mary Trentadue, board member. Hello, welcome.
My name is Brett Davey. I'm the Deputy Chief with New West Fund.
Haley Finnegan, MWPD Communications.
I'm Annie Sadeko, the Social Planning and Homelessness Prevention Supervisor.
Patrick Malone, board member. Kingsley Jones, I'm the Acting Inspector of Patrol Division.
Colin Betts, the Acting Inspector of the Investigations Division. Ryan Long with Community and Social Resources.
Board member. Jeff Scott, the Acting Inspector of the Administration Division.
Who's my Assistant Secretary? I'm Sarah Patterson, HR Manager at the community.
I'm Jacob Darren, and I'm the Finance Manager.
Andrew Perry, I'm one of the acting deputy chiefs of the police.
Kelsey Wall, I'm a board member.
My name is Sasha Henderson, Chair of the Police Board.
Even more Acting Deputy Chief of Police Division. Paul Highland, I'm the Acting Chief Counsel.
All right, so I'll pass it over to Brad and Annie to give us a presentation.
Not unless I can join the Zoom call somehow. Or I can send the presentation to someone who's already joined.
Oh, I can send you the Zoom link quickly. Think about that.
While you're working on that, I'll just give a little bit of background for myself. As I've said, I am the Deputy Chief here in New Westminster. I've been with the city for over 25 years. I got involved with the project that we're going to be speaking of today, right back in the planning phase, and was actually involved in a couple of initiatives the city had prior to the project starting. I'm also a pharmacist, and I'm a clinical pharmacist with Fraser Health Authority. I was with Fraser Health Authority back in the late 80s and continued through to today, long before they were even called the Fraser Health Authority. Have some experience. I owned a community pharmacy in an inner city area that dealt a lot with the homeless and unsheltered and mental health and substance use. Was robbed 4 times at gunpoint and broken into 7 times, but that was not related to homelessness. That was related to organized crime. Have some experience with police and police boards. I was then on the a committee with the College of Pharmacists, RCMP, Vancouver PD, SFU, BC Pharmacy Association that brought in the new bylaw and pharmacy security laws that came in September 15th of 2015 to address all the robberies that happened there, and was involved in helping Windsor Police and Windsor bring in similar pharmacy security laws. That's a long way of saying that I have experience with response to people that have emergency response to people who have overdosed. I also have response from the business perspective in engaging people who are homeless, have mental health or substance use issues, and have even been a care provider to these groups as well. So I think that's kind of where I fit into this project, and these are some of the things that I bring to this project and why I've been involved right from the onset. I think we're going to be going without the presentation, aren't we?
Well,
you all have your hands.
The guest one doesn't work, the NWPD guest.
It's asking for the network security.
Especially that.
Okay, I don't have it. I don't have it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's work from this.
I don't know.
We can work from the handout.
Oh, here, you can give
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
So
And I don't need one, if somebody else.
I think we have more
Do you
than
need the Wi-Fi password?
Is that what you're looking for, the Wi-Fi password?
Yes.
NWAC.
NWNET, NWNet, ACC 5.
The whole community knows.
Yeah.
Everyone's just
Free
outside,
Wi-Fi,
we don't
our kids are holiday gift to everyone in a 4-block radius.
Okay, so the project is to discuss the city's response to mental health, substance use, and homelessness. And we're calling this project the Crisis Response Pilot Project. Similar to other municipalities in Metro Vancouver and the province, New Westminster is facing these crises of homelessness, mental health, and substance use. And these got worse during the COVID-19 pandemic. And they're also been exaggerated by the opioid epidemic that has hit cities. These crises are complex and interrelated, and they're challenging to all forms of government, all levels of government. These crises are impacting the community in never ways, including the suffering and those experiencing them, and those who are dealing with the associated externalities. So that would include like businesses and communities, or businesses and residents of the community. The crises were straining city resources, impacting staff and health safety, and contributing to businesses and residents' concerns, and led to an overwhelming number of complaints by business and community towards the city. The 2023 point-in-time homeless count showed that there was about a 65% increase in homelessness, and that all communities were facing this issue. It wasn't just in Westminster. And in fact, the range was about 65% to 91%. So we've seen communities that faced a much greater increase in homelessness than what we faced here in New Westminster across the 3 years. In New Westminster, we have about 203 homeless people. And on the night of the count, we had 63 of these people were inside the nightly shelter. So what that means is that in the morning when they have to leave the nightly shelter, they actually join that unsheltered group. So we ended up with about 120 people of the homeless that were unsheltered throughout the day. And I think that contributes towards the externalities that we're facing, because these people are now interacting with businesses in the community when they're out and about and operating. I think it's also important to note that 27% of the homeless self-identified as Indigenous, compared to 3.1% of our baseline population. What was interesting is when we looked at the unsheltered homeless, 43% of the unsheltered homeless identified as Indigenous, compared to only 12% of the sheltered homeless identified as Indigenous. So we sort of feel that this speaks towards the fact that a lot of the Indigenous don't utilize our supports either because of lack of trust or because these supports are not properly culturally appropriate for the experience that they faced or their family members have faced. It's also worth mentioning that 44% of the unsheltered or the homeless have lived in the community for 6 years or greater. When we compare that to our housed residents, they're actually a little less transient than our housed residents. So the term transient shouldn't really apply. You find that after people first become homeless, they stay in the communities that they're in because that's where they have some of the formal and informal supports that they're already familiar with, and that they actually move around less often than our housed personnel. 40%, 7% of the unsheltered or the homeless report that they have mental health issues, with 52% supporting they have addiction issues. And this just supports what we're all saying, in that these crises are interrelated and you can't just address one of them without and have great success without trying to address all three. Prior to this project, the city developed the livability strategy and the downtown livability working group, which did have police representation on it. Since the strategy was developed in 2022, we did initiate a whole bunch of actions that included conducting daily patrols of the parks and public spaces with regards to encampments and sheltering, issuing notices to dismantle any of the shelters that were put up. We contracted biohazardous waste collection and disposal services to help clean up a lot of the messes. We focused additional attention and resources on the downtown, particularly related to cleanup and maintenance, because that's where we're getting a lot of the complaints from. We've increased the shelter capacity. We hosted a mental health roundtable. The intent of the mental health roundtable was to increase collaboration between the nonprofit, faith-based, and provincial supports so that they could coordinate their efforts better and hopefully have a greater impact. We worked with the Canadian Mental Health Association on a project referred to as PACT, which I'm sure everybody in this room is probably pretty familiar with because they've been actively involved with the police. In fact, PACT will report that they get a large number of referrals from the police. We access senior government funding for initiatives such as the Eyes on the Street, which is a micro street cleaning program which provide employment to some of the less fortunate and also contributed toward a more clean downtown. And they tried to animalize and energize the downtown core through staging of activities and events. Despite all of these efforts, and given the complexities of these three crises, we got the sense that things weren't working well enough. Complaints were still coming in. And so we decided we needed to develop a more comprehensive city-wide approach, okay? It was basically what we're trying to do is get some dedicated resources to address the problems, get some dedicated staff that were trained in this, because too many people were dealing with this outside of their normal scope of their work. We wanted to be more responsive to the residents and to the businesses that had a lot of the complaints and were complaining about a lot of the issues that were coming up. City also realized that it needs to significantly enhance collaboration with senior levels of government to help cover the costs, because a lot of this doesn't fall under the city mandate. A lot of these issues, they should actually fall under a lot of the provincial mandates. We also tried to get a lot of, again, like I said before, tried to draw on a lot of supports from the nonprofits and faith-based, not the non-faith-based organizations, to try to get a more collaborative approach, drawing in businesses and communities, because we recognize that unless we get everybody on board, we're going to have a hard time progressing. Okay, so the crisis response pilot project. Before we got into the crisis response pilot project, we went into a fair bit of engagement, a fair bit of research. We looked at the literature, we looked at what other municipalities are doing. We engaged a lot of the professionals. We tried to come up with something, cherry-picked, I guess, to steal your words from yesterday, cherry-picked all the best practices and tried to collaborate them all together. Then we developed 3 teams. The first team is called the crisis response team. The second team is the operations support team. And the third team is the policy and collaboration, policy development and collaboration team. And I'll just go into what those 3 different teams do now. The crisis response team, its job is non-clinical outreach. Its job is to build connections and assist those that are living with these 3 crises, okay? Help connect them to community-based services that may or may not be in the city mandate, most of them which are not, they're either in the provincial mandate or nonprofits and health, faith-based organizations mandates, but to try to help them stabilize their lives to the way they like their lives to be stabilized. They also champion the needs of the Indigenous peoples with living experience in the 3 crises and identify how the city can provide a culturally appropriate response. So a lot of them were not utilizing the resources and services that were available to them. So we try to bridge that gap and try to make sure that in the future they will utilize these services and build some trust. As well, we take a trauma-informed approach for both the Indigenous and those that are suffering from substance abuse to try to get collaboration and build the connections. In the first 4 months since we started, we had a soft launch in May. Our outreach staff have had 184 interactions and made 590 referrals to services. This is comparable to about 15 under our old system. So the way we were doing things before with the integrated services team going around, in about the same time frame, they would have made about 15 referrals to support. So now we're looking at 590 referrals. So we're getting a lot more referrals to supports for a lot of the unsheltered and the homeless that are out in the streets. The other team is the operations support team, and it consists of existing city staff, and that would include police representation as well. And it's to respond to the traditional and core services that it used to, things like emergencies, fire prevention, life safety, cleanliness, compliance with city bylaws, assess staff needs related to health and safety. They're doing it a little bit differently now. They're doing it with focused training in terms of how to engage the homeless, how to be more trauma-informed, culturally appropriate, and to better interact and provide these services that are focused on the externalities associated with these crises. That would include implementation of the sanitation trailer. We had over 1,500 visits per month on average on the sanitation trailer. And as we were talking outside, we were talking about how we got marched around to look at some of the externalities. And this is one of the solutions that's brought forward by the operations support team to try and address some of the externalities. The last team is the policy development collaboration team. Now, those first two teams I mentioned are all addressing issues in the streets right now and the concerns that we have right now. And I highlighted how the crisis response team has made 590 referrals, but of course, some of those referrals take some time before they're not all gonna result in an outcome right away. And sometimes that's just because we don't have all the resources or the capacity for those resources in place. This is where the policy development and collaboration team comes in. It focuses on the long-term and sustainable strategies to address the three crises. It's to provide permanent supportive housing and to also supplement or advocate for to make sure that the supports that the supporting agencies need, they have enough capacity to properly deliver the services that are required. Collaborates with senior levels of government. Said before, a lot of these don't fall within the mandate of the city, they fall within provincial mandates, so that we will be trying to get further funding from the senior levels of government, but again, also have them increase the amount of services that they provide to our residents. It's intended to foster strategic partnerships and has developed staff liaisons to work closely with resident, business, faith-based, and before I had done that one today, and nonprofit and provincial interests. So a lot of the staff would be dealing with, advocating at UBCM and advocating to the staff, but also trying to bring all these supports together, try to get them to work collaboratively, not work on all their silos, and enhance the capacity they have to take care of the streets. I'm going to pass it off to Annie now, and Annie's going to take it over.
Okay. So in addition to the establishment of the three teams that govern the pilot, there's a number of actions that are essential to the crisis response pilot project. This includes winter shelter planning. So at this time we have 10 beds at the Maida Duncan residence for women only that are emergency weather response beds. There's also an additional 24 co-ed beds that are available 24/7 at the Cliff Block. We're also looking at a temporary as well as a permanent 24/7 shelter with supports. The temporary 24/7 shelter is currently in negotiation at 502 Columbia, and we're looking at options for a purpose-built facility located outside the downtown core. A Health Connect and Resource Center with a health and wellness focus that really addresses the needs of the daytime unhoused population. As a staff team, we're looking at some promising practices elsewhere of other sort of hub models or resource centers that are open. We've also done a visit to the Evelyn Solar Center in Vancouver to really understand how that model is working. And I think that would really help our daytime unhoused population. Right now, the population needs to move all over the community to meet their needs. And this would provide a dedicated space for outreach teams to come and meet with their clients in person. We're also looking at more supportive housing. So in addition to the 52 units at 602 Agnes, we're looking at a development of 60 units with up to 10 complex care beds, as well as an inhalation component in conjunction with the Health Contact Center and enhanced outreach and service provision. So the Health Contact Center does have an overdose prevention site, but it only provides injection-only witness consumption. So looking to enhance that for people who inhale substances, which is an increasing proportion of people who use substances. I should also mention that we're also commencing work on a public toilet or a citywide toilet strategy. And we're also looking at how that strategy can address the needs of people who are unhoused. So in terms of the importance of some of these actions, this would reduce the externalities associated with the three crises on businesses and residents. As I mentioned, a temporary 24/7 shelter would reduce the daytime unhoused population. from 120 down to 57. Additional supportive housing, we know this is desperately needed in our community. And we're also finding ways to work with our faith-based and nonprofit organizations that operate these sites, as well as BC Housing, to prioritize the placement of our locally unhoused population. And as I mentioned, the Health Connected Resource Center would really provide a great space and more efficient way for outreach teams to connect with their clients. Just in the interest of time, I won't read out all the folks that were engaged in developing the pilot, but we did do extensive consultation with provincial and regional bodies, including with the Health Authority, both in advance of the pilot launching and since we launched in September. We also did engagement with the community, including with businesses and resident associations. There's also a communications coordinator that is embedded in the pilot project, and her role is to really develop a communication strategy that reaches 3 target audiences. So that includes internal staff at the city, external partners, and the public. And so the plan ensures that all 3 audiences are well informed, outlines the needs and communication opportunities for each, and it identifies the methods, optimal methods for reaching them. As part of the pilot, there's 2 working groups that have been formed. These are comprised of both internal city staff and external members. So the implementation working group includes representation from faith-based and nonprofit organizations, as well as from people with lived and living experience related to the 3 crises. And so their role is to really guide the implementation of the pilot. We've had our first launch meeting in September, and we'll be meeting with them 4 times per year. And we'll be gathering feedback on their interactions with the crisis response team and the pilot in general, and finding ways to refine our work as we go. Additionally, there is an engagement and collaboration working group, and this includes representatives from the city, as well as businesses and residents associations and the tenants union. And so this working group is really trying to support the collaboration activities that we're engaging in that Brad mentioned with senior levels of government, provide an opportunity for businesses and residents to communicate concerns as well as potential solutions that they see, and to inform how the pilot project could potentially respond to these issues, and as well as to identify a role for and gain the support of businesses and residents in some of these collaboration activities. Again, we met with this group for the first time in September, and we'll be meeting with them 4 times per year. The pilot is also undergoing an independent evaluation through Douglas College, and it includes an evaluation advisory committee. So the external evaluator will help us to determine evaluation criteria and inform the data that we're collecting to support the pilot project. Because it is a 2-year, we really want to be collecting good data to understand both how we can refine the pilot throughout the 2 years, but also to understand the progress that is made at the end of the 2 years, and hopefully support some of our advocacy work to get have the pilot be funded in our community and in other communities as well. The independent evaluator sits on both of the working groups and is involved in other conversations as well. So just to close, the pilot project is based on best practices and lesson learned from other municipalities. Pilot project has dedicated resource and trained staff to assist the unhoused related to the 3 crises and to address businesses and resident concerns. We hope that the pilot will enhance communication with businesses and residents related to the 3 crises and provide additional opportunities for engagement. And we hope that it also enhances communication and collaboration with senior levels of government, with faith-based and nonprofit organizations. That's that.
Awesome, thank you.
Questions?
Yeah, so we'll open it up to the board, but also staff have questions.
Thank you. Thanks both of you for this. I just have 2 questions. Who is the crisis response team? Which department or what people or what skills do they have to be on this team?
So the crisis response team, both of the candidates we have, they're both of the outreach workers that we have. I'll speak to them first. Actually have experience with outreach. One of them came from a provincial outreach team called the Assertive Community Treatment Team, which is from Fraser Health. The other one actually came from Purposes outreach team that has harm reduction experience through for society. So we were very fortunate, we got people that have quite extensive experience in this. And that's worked out well in terms of building ties with both the faith-based nonprofit organizations and the provincial organizations, because they actually had worked in those organizations and had key people within those organizations they can work with. After that, we had to put together some training for them that was specific. I mean, they're outreaching to the community. There's a homelessness 101 course, some specific trauma-informed training we went through. I don't think there's anything specific to being culturally appropriate or anything like that, but do you recall?
I believe that we're working with Sonoma on.
Yeah, so that's
on
coming
options for
still.
that, yeah.
Yeah. So we do have an Indigenous consultant that is going to work with them on that. Fortunately, both the people that are in those roles now, it's not new to them. They do have some experience with it.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question. Oh, there's four.
Four on the team, 2 outreach.
I see. Thank you. Great, thank you. And then how is the police department integrated into this project in any way?
So they're in the operations support team.
Okay,
So I think Ryan is actually the representative
okay,
for the operations support team. And we're going to be having some integration. We just recently, we've only recently been able to get all the positions filled and where we want everybody. And we have a person that is going to be taking on sort of the compliance, voluntary compliance role within the operations support team. And that person probably will be integrating direct with Ryan as we move forward. That's where a lot of this will fit in terms of supporting the enforcement in the appropriate way.
okay, thank you, thanks. Yeah, Alejandro.
Actually, my question is somehow related to Mary. I understand that Purpose was doing something similar before. It was transitioned to the city. Was there a reason, and are we getting more outreach now that it's with the city? And the second is to engage with different groups. With the downtown residents, what's the feedback from them?
I missed the first.
I think
question.
the first one is about the contract that Lookup had coming to the city to have
Purpose.
dedicated outreach workers.
Mhm. Yeah, so Lookup did have a contract. I think it was based on, that contract did end up being terminated. Part of the reason for that termination was, first of all, it was just focused specifically on housing, and it wasn't produced, it didn't end up with the results that we were hoped that it should produce. And I think part of the reason is that would be just the crisis response component to that project. It didn't have that policy development and advocacy team behind it that would be coming to make sure that the resources that they had referred to are available. And that was part of the strategic change made for some of this, so that if we just attack that one piece and make that connection, but we don't make sure to follow up and fill the services that they need to refer to, that we wouldn't be successful. And waiting for the government to do that wasn't happening. So that's where that change came from. What was your second question?
You guys engage with different groups. One I'm very curious is the downtown residents. What's the feedback from your interactions?
Yeah, so we've met with both the downtown residents and the businesses downtown, and we've given them basically almost the identical presentation. We've met with quite a few groups. And what's interesting is that when you do meet with them, I think some of them initially show up with an adversarial type approach. But once you spend the time to educate them, and we spent more time with them than we did here. Here we told you what we're doing. We spent some time to tell them why we were doing it and the impacts we thought that would have. So in other words, if we were to get an inhalation component, we'll be reducing some of the public consumption of drugs by getting them inside, or by getting that Health Connect and Resource Center, we're giving somebody places to go during the day. Once we started to end by turning the nightly shelter into a 24/7 shelter, that's going to actually reduce the exposure to businesses and community by providing people a place to go during the day and meeting their needs. They won't have to do their business in the streets if they have a place to go. So once we started in the longer presentations, when we had the time to explain these things and why we're doing these things and the impacts we're hoping to get and expecting to get, it was incredible how much of the crowd we turned to support. So we turned a lot of the neutral people to support quite quickly, and we turned some of the people in opposition to support as well. I'm not gonna sit here and try and tell you that we convinced the whole world that everything is roses, but we left with those meetings feeling like we were doing the right thing based on the response we got from the majority of the people we presented to.
Can I just add to that, we do have representation from the Downtown Residents Association on the engagement and collaboration working group. So I think the hope is to sort of keep that dialogue going and find ways to sort of reach that, that proportion of residents through some of the activities.
Yes, because I think for me, what it would be great is like the education part, when you said earlier that you were drugging yourself like several times, and you emphasized that it was not the drug addict or like the homeless, it was the drug related. And I think that is really important to tell people that not all homeless are bad people, because we live in this culture that there is a homeless is a criminal, homeless criminal. And I really think how can we just remove that stigma and get everyone on board that we can help people without and remove that stigma. If that makes sense.
I see an opportunity here, really. You're right. But that message coming from police services carries a lot more weight than it might from us. You know, we have our communications person, we have a communications plan, maybe they should be integrated. Don't know. This is one of the things that maybe communicating with Ryan Long through the operations support team, that they can talk about these things. But I think if that's we have the evidence and support to say that, and I believe that to be true, then we should consider messaging that together.
Thank you.
Yeah,
This is great. Thank you for coming to present to us. I was really excited to hear about the independent evaluation piece. And I'm just wondering, are there plans for that to be shared publicly? Like, how are you planning to disseminate the evaluation report?
So the reporting back, the formal reporting back will be of 1 year and 2 years. And that formal reporting eventually will be provided directly to council. Informal reporting is going to happen all the way through the project. And the intent of that is that if we can see something early on that we need to change this, we want to change it early instead of waiting for the whole year. So the project is going to be quite iterative. So the informal reporting from Douglas College will happen sooner, and they are attending the working groups so that they can help advise us, inform us, and refine the project sooner. The formal reporting will be eventually made public.
Hi, Drew. Welcome.
Thanks. Apologies for being late, folks.
That's all right. I will share the presentation that city staff from the 3 crisis response gave us. I have that. I'll share that with you, Drew, so you can review it after the meeting.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay. Anybody else?
No.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming and for the work that you're doing, and we look forward to. I look forward to better understanding how we can integrate and work collaboratively, because I think these issues impact, our direct service staff, our frontline sworn members every day. And so, really looking forward to hearing how that collaboration with Ryan's team goes, and what we can do to make sure we're all painting from the same brush and working towards the same goal.
Yeah, we appreciate the opportunity to present, and I want to echo those comments that part of our strategy is that we're all working towards the same vision. So I think that the opportunity to work with Ryan through the operations support team would work well towards that common goal.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks all.
Thank you.
Right, does anyone have anything they'd like to pull off consent today? Okay, you, Kelsey, you always have something.
I do.
Patrick?
No.
Can I please call 2.3 and 2.9?
Okay. Anyone else? Alejandro? Where did I? Drew, do you have anything to pull off consent?
I do not. Thanks.
And Alejandro joined the 3 crisis response team. No shortage of work there, so I'm sure.
I'm just going to turn off my video so you don't see my giant face on that TV screen eating yogurt.
Amazing. I am just going to wait for Alejandro because I don't think that we have quorum without him, actually. We have, what is it, 3, because I, but I don't have a vote. They have just 50%. I'm looking at Patrick, because I just feel like he will know the answer.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay, okay, then can I have a motion, would someone like to move, a motion to approve consent, the rest of consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay, second, all in favor, all opposed, carried. Okay, 2.3, the operational report.
I just wanted to make a quick comment on the change of format in the report and just say that I appreciate this. It gives me a lot more insight and overview onto what the different teams are actually focused on. So I just wanted to say thank you for the revision of the format, and I think that this is useful, and let's continue.
So if there's anything else like that you would like to add, so I've written in here in a paragraph form. I think maybe for the next one, I probably will do some sort of graph, if you'd like that, versus what we have here. It's really kind of up to you guys how you want to go ahead and do it. This is like the first kick at the can here to change it, so.
I feel like personally, I don't know what I don't know. But like this was a great starting point for me. So
Okay.
like I'm open to revisions if you feel like there's a better way to present the information. But I read this and I was like, oh, this is great. Now I feel like I know what's going on a little bit better. I don't know.
It'll be an evolving document. I think
Yeah.
we'll probably add more data points and information, and then probably the board can let us know it's like, we don't really need that part in there. So
Sure.
it's kind of a, an ongoing project as far as what is important. But perfect, thank you.
Anyone else on 2.3? Drew?
Nope.
Good, awesome, okay, that is just for information, right? I'm just looking, I don't think it has anything attached to it. No, right? What's in here?
It's just a-
No, okay, perfect, okay, 2.9.
That was me again.
Yes, that's you again.
I just wanted to make a comment on this because I was the one who asked for this to come back to the board. So thank you for the report. I think this is really helpful background. I know that the board received some additional information about overtime about a year and a half ago before I was on the board. So understanding the breakdown of where overtime comes from in the different buckets and how that's really not affected by some of the backfill was really helpful. I do like, and I just kind of wanted to have a little bit of a discussion about this because I understand that the backfill strategy isn't intended to necessarily have an impact on overtime. But I guess part of my understanding of backfill and where there's some pressure on members would be really around patrol, which is where I see, there's call out when you can't hit minimums. So I guess that's the area where I would expect there to be like a little bit of sort of balancing between if we have more bodies, like potentially less call out overtime to hit minimums to run shift. And again, this is like a very cursory understanding that I have. So I just wanted to sort of put that question out there specifically, understanding that there's all these other buckets that's just, that is what it is and that's not impacted. But yeah, I guess that's sort of my question for you.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. We do recognize absolutely that the backfill strategy, one of the benefits could be potentially reducing our overtime, absolutely. We do recognize that's a factor. I think the challenge, as what you've highlighted on, is that for the most part, it's really for backfilling the minimums on patrol is where we'd be able to see that we have insufficient staffing. The person was called out for that purpose. We'd have to, please feel free to chime in, Jack, on, we have to look at that a little bit further in detail or try tracking that further to make sure the reasons are for these absences versus other issues. And that may just be a little bit more challenging. I don't know if the way we've categorized this would actually help flush that out at this point in time. But we do recognize absolutely, right? It can have it, and most of it will happen in patrol because we do have required minimums. So I think it just depends on the board. Would they like us to dive deeper in that? That may take some time to tracking to be able to do that. We have obviously assessed the operational status, which is the original need, and we're starting to monitor that on a monthly basis, what our staffing levels are in the different areas. And obviously patrol is, you know, one of the most flush out there, because that's where we're putting the extra staff, so. So yeah, it's really just up to what do you find is going to be helpful within these parameters, and how much of a big difference is it gonna make over the overall budget, this overtime for that purpose, but we would need to dig deeper, so I think we highlighted it before on that, so.
Yeah.
Sorry, if I could just add that too, we have had the same, roughly the same patrol deployment model since I've been here, so 30 years. So the total is patrol review that we're in the RFP stage. We'll maybe speak a little bit about that. Are we utilizing our resources in the best manner possible? Like we have certain, staffing minimums for different shifts. Where that comes from, it's not necessary, it's anecdotal, it's been there for a long time. So again, are we deploying our resources in patrol in the most efficient fashion? Ideally, this review will speak to that, whether it's like a different scheduling pattern, trying to time maximum members to the time when our call load's the highest. That may have an impact as well, because again, right now we have 4 shifts and they work 12-hour shifts because that fits nicely into the 24-hour clock. But is that necessarily the best way to deploy frontline? I don't know. I don't have the answers, but I'm really hopeful that this report will at least give us some data about that kind of deployment and how that will impact then staffing.
One other thing, Kelsey, is we do recognize, for example, in the overtime table there, that our 2024 year-to-date patrol overtime, yes, is trending under budget so far, and a significant difference from the previous years. We don't know obviously how we're going to end up, and at the same time too, the backfill strategy just started in 2023. We're going to complete next year, so we really haven't had a lot of time to actually realize the true impact of that from an overtime standpoint. That's just one other consideration that we may need to just wait till time has a chance to actually hopefully show the true impact of this strategy on the variety of different categories that we've highlighted here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciate how considered you were in like making the observations about what the correlations might be here, because I agree, it's hard to draw like a causation line. The only other thing that I wanted to raise about this is that I did notice that there is, in the future considerations section, it's laid out, do we need to look at this in more detail? And what the sort of staff lift around that would be. And I just wanted to, I guess, maybe sort of put that in front of the board as to whether that would be useful for us, or whether, backfill is backfill, and we've kind of said that we're hoping to finish that and move forward to looking at, our next thing. Is there a way that we want to evaluate backfill, or are we just going to move on to our next issue? So just wanted to have a bit of a board discussion about that.
Yeah. What does anyone, Drew, Patrick, Alejandro, do you want to weigh in on? You're welcome to bring a motion if you feel particularly strongly. If you just wanted to hear opinions from the group. Patrick, do you have any thoughts on that?
I would want to see the results of the study before wading any more into decision making about staffing or backfilling or anything of that nature. So yeah, I'd like to see the results too, but that RFP process once it's through.
Yeah. Drew?
I would agree. I'm on the RFP panel. We're just about to wrap that up shortly. So it'd be great to see the output of that work before we go further.
That's that by you. Okay.
Sorry, just maybe one other comment. We recognize, right, this is going to be an ongoing assessment moving forward, right? It's not just we've done 3 years and we're done. We're going to have to be continuously monitoring this. As you can see on the chart, right, our non-operational staff are trending around 20 plus, which is over the original 15.5. Some of that is obviously due to increased hiring to help meet that too. So making sure that our units are adequately staffed, and the reasons either why or why they're not is going to be, in our opinion, an ongoing assessment that we should be doing for workforce planning and staffing levels moving forward, right? So.
Okay, great. Yeah, it sounds like we, this happens I've seen I see this happen all the time where we kind of like, we're bumping everything we're putting a lot into this report, so hopefully it will give us some meaningful data and some information for us to help make a few more informed, a bit better informed decisions, I guess. So there is a staff recommendation that the board move to approve that report. I will entertain that motion if anyone would like to move. Second, all in favor, all opposed, carried. Awesome. Okay, moving on to ongoing business, 3.1. This is over to Jacqueline. This is the 2025 provisional operational budget approval. Did you have anything to say about it, or did you?
I think the chief will speak to it. I mean, the report is the same as last month, so Paul, did you want to do the intro?
Sure. Well, first of all, I really want to say thank you to all the staff and the board that worked on this report. As we all will remember, this process started back, well, for us, probably even in April, but certainly for the board in May. A number of different iterations with regards to the operating budget. I think at one point we were looking at a potential 13+%. A lot of work has gone into that to reduce that down. We're sitting at 9.76, which is where we were after the last board meeting. So thanks very much. I want to really single out Jacqueline, who's lived and breathed this for the last number of months, but she's amazing at what she does, and she's kept us all on track. And thanks for all the work you've done. This is very impressive. I will just flag, this report is for all intents and purposes a copy of the last report. The one thing I will flag for the board, and I'm sure you've seen it in your package, in October, the city council did pass a motion asking city staff to come back with at least an option of a 4.5% tax increase, a citywide tax increase. So there's been a bunch of work done with city staff that we are engaged with. So we received some information back from city finance that if 4.5% increase was approved, it would potentially require a $560,000 reduction in the police department's proposed 2025 budget. I say that because that's based on some theoretical work. I'm not sure what it is that city finance did, all involved, how they came up with that number. But that doesn't bind the board. The board, as we all know, is independent, has the authority to move forward the budget that it thinks is required for effective and adequate policing. There has been no official ask at this point from the city or city finance for a reduction. So our recommendation is that for the board to proceed with the budget as indicated. If there is a change to that, that would come by a request from council, and then the board would have deliberations on what it wanted to do, which would include probably reports from city staff on what the implications were for any reduction.
Okay, awesome. Does anyone want to weigh in about the budget for final time before we send Jacqueline off to go start the 2026 budget?
I'll jump in. I'm supporting the recommendation from staff.
Yeah, I too just want to thank you so much for doing such diligent work, and I know we had really robust conversation about this, which I think is great, and these aren't easy decisions to make, and it will be interesting to see where I keep my police board chair hat firmly on my head right now. It'll be interesting to see where that council lands and what the implications will be. That's a significant reduction to discretionary funding. And I think that it will be important to communicate to the public that that would, you know, essentially eliminate the 3 sworn members for our backfill strategy. So yeah, I think that but I will leave that to council to have those conversations. Yeah, so Drew has moved recommendation of the report. Second, all in favor, all opposed, and we're carried. We're through it. All right, now we can move on to the 2025 capital budget. Is that you?
Again, just thanks again to Jock for working on this. This again is the similar number, the same number from the last meeting. The major increase here, I think we've discussed this, was the change in ECOM radio costing. I think originally we were forecasting about $650,000 based on the information that we have from ECOM. We're over $1 million to replace our radio system. But yeah, that's kind of where we're sitting with capital for 2025. And I'll turn it over to Jacqueline in case there's anything to add to that.
Yeah, no, it is basically the same report that was discussed last time, and these are these are the projects for next year that we think we can both implement within the year and are the most important to action next year.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Oh, we're good. We chatted about it to death. Okay, well, I will ask that someone moves to move a recommendation. Anyone?
Move.
Second? All in favor, so we're voting in favor of approving the 2025 draft, final, sorry, capital budget. All in favor? All opposed, carried, awesome, great. And the final piece is 3.3, the financial report. Yes, you
Okay.
have things you'd like to say about that?
Yeah, I think this is probably, well, this is the third quarter of the year, which is probably the most important. It's the one where we can really see where we're trending, some actual numbers come to realization, how many people were we able to hire this year. So I think this number that we're presenting here with a budget surplus of being under budget by about 160 will be fairly accurate. In Q2, I had quite a few generous estimates for what acting roles were going to cost. This was something we've never really done in my history here, so we were really unsure how to cost out some of the acting roles. So we've done a lot more analysis during the last 3 months, and I think we're trending to be right on target at about that 160. So that actually is still over and above the 140-ish that we had approved during the contract. So positive news for this quarter. I do think that a lot of the grant funding that we've been approved of for all of the files were really helpful this year. If we did not receive that grant funding, we would not be in this position. So something to keep in mind is that when we have large files that are suddenly arise and we don't have grant funding, we may need to think about what we're gonna do with that in the future. But for this quarter, good news. Any specific questions?
Well, how do we keep those
Grant funding
grant dollars coming is
Keep 'em
be
flying.
my question. It'll be, I mean, we have a new minister and a new Minister of State, I think, on this file, so it'll be interesting to see where those conversations go in the near future. But in the meantime, there is a recommendation that we receive this report for information. Moved. Second, all in favor, opposed, carried. Awesome, okay, I think we just moved to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, awesome, all in favor, you know. All opposed, carried, okay, awesome, okay, that is that. Now we shall log